Hello everyone, this is Julie Sire. This week we're going to be talking about assessment basics. Motivation, as you know from your own experiences, can be diminished quickly in a classroom. At no time is this more apparent than when we study very hard for an exam and then walk away feeling as though all our work was for nothing, especially if it was an exam on a topic for which we already had low self-efficacy. This week, we are going to begin talking about assessment, starting with a discussion of the types of assessment and the differences between them. Also, as most of you have an eye towards a career in education, we will talk about some examples of each type. Properly executed assessment boosts the esteem of instructors and students and provides a valid snapshot of learning. Did it occur? How much or how little? And what remains to be done? We're going to spend a few minutes discussing each type in turn and their characteristics. Before we do that, though, let's start with our objectives. So what should you be able to do by the end of this unit? You should be able to identify and list the 4 major types of assessment. You should understand the differences between the types and be able to provide examples of each type. Let's start with this idea of what are the 4 major types of assessment. And they are listed in order as diagnostic, which is gathering and evaluation of detailed information for providing appropriate scaffolding. Formative shows where students are in their learning and is essential to good instruction. Summative takes place at set intervals. It relates to progress and knowledge acquisition. So typically, summative assessment would be a final exam or an exam of some type. And then lastly, there's evaluative. Evaluative assessment is a judgment on the instruction itself. So again, this idea of diagnostic assessment or pre-assessments, if you'd rather, they provide information about a student's prior knowledge. This will help identify any misconceptions that students may have about the topic. It also provides a baseline for understanding the amount of learning that needs to be done. So basically, it's a snapshot of what they already know so you can help them get to the next level. This allows instructors to build concepts. Some examples of diagnostic assessment are summative assessments of prior learning activities. So you may use a prior exam on the topic of triangles to help you develop a lesson on isosceles triangles or something to that effect. Short assessments that focus on key knowledge and concepts. So you may just ask your students what they already know by doing this. You can also look at prior academic achievement. So how well did they do last year? How well did they do in the quarter before? You may also look at things like portfolio. So again, the idea is to provide a diagnostic to just figure out where they are right now. The next type is formative assessment. So formative assessment shows whether or not learning has occurred. It can be prompted or unprompted, formal or informal. So if you think about a typical classroom in the United States, a lot of times you'll hear instructors asking things like thumbs up or thumbs down, which is an evaluation for students and for the instructor of whether or not students got the concept. You can ask questions of students to see, kind of dig around and figure out where they're at in their learning. So formative assessment should occur fairly regularly. So you want to keep track of where everybody is in terms of their learning. If something's not working, then you're going to need to take a step back and do something else. So formative assessment also provides a means to improve learning. It's so we know where students are at. If we don't know where they're at, it's hard to guide them. Formative assessment also involves feedback. So it allows you to say to a student, oh, this sentence is really well formulated, but you miss this main point. So it's a process. Learning is a process. And a good formative assessment will help you become involved in the learning of your students and help them scaffold their own learning. So it should promote self-regulation. It should promote the idea that they are thinking metacognitively. They are thinking about whether or not these concepts are matching with their thought processes. Formative assessments also should not be graded. The idea here is just to provide both you and the student with a way of measuring if they are getting the material or not. It's not designed to be punitive, whereas we can somewhat think of summative assessments as being punitive. So if we don't do well and we get a bad grade, then we're probably not going to get the rewards that we were looking for in terms of social acceptance. Sometimes monetary rewards are given by parents. All of those kinds of things tend to be linked to the summative assessments and grades. So some types of formative assessment or observation. So just looking, seeing students' expressions. You can use questioning, so asking, discussion, exit and admin slips, learning and response logs, who's saying what when. Graphic organizers can give you an idea of whether or not a student is following the flow of thought. Practice presentations, not the final presentation, but practice presentations. Visual representations, individual whiteboards where everybody in the classroom might have a whiteboard that they could hold up to say yes or no. Laundry day, constructive quizzes, a think, pair, share. Again, the thumbs up, thumbs down. Moving on to summative assessment. So summative assessment, generally we introduce this concept at the beginning of a course so we know when these are going to take place. Summative assessments have a cumulative aspect. So it may be the final exam or it may be an exam at the end of a unit, but it has a cumulative aspect. So it's from one point with material and information being added onto it. Summative assessment demonstrates understanding and knowledge acquisition. It should be authentic, it should be customized to the topic at hand, and generally should be scored with a rubric. Some types of summative assessment include a project, a paper, an exam, or even a portfolio. The fourth type of assessment are evaluative assessments. So they determine the significance or worth of the instructional strategies. So again, as I said, it's really a measure of whether or not things worked. So it should be an analysis and comparison of actual progress versus planned progress. Evaluative assessments should be oriented toward improving plans for future implementation. So every instructor lays this groundwork, they have everything laid out, and this is the plan. They hope that things are going to go this way, and almost inevitably, things don't go quite the way you planned. And so you always need to be thinking about, what could I do better next time? What didn't work? What did work? How can I make it better? So evaluative assessments are part of a continuing improvement process. Types of evaluative assessments include pre and post tests, so pre being diagnostic and post being summative tests. So you can use those to measure whether or not you actually got where you thought you should be with all students. You can look at student work, student surveys, you can ask students how things went, what worked for them, what they thought they got out of it. You can also look at things like portfolios and standardized tests. And that concludes our mini lecture on the basic types of assessment.